Hello everybody and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today I'm featuring Anzrag, the Quake-Mole. He's a 4 mana 8/4 legendary creature mole god, and whenever he becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase there's an additional combat phase. For 7 mana total he must be blocked each combat this turn if able. His activated ability is quite expensive, so we will force our opponents to block this big guy, and with that cheat additional combat phases in. We will force those blocks with cards like Compel Duel, a 2 mana sorcery and target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn and must be blocked this turn if able. Anzrag has more of a medium toughness, so it is great to give him +3/+3 with this card. You look upon the Tarrasque, a 5 mana instant where you choose one. Run and Hide says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn. Or you can gather your Courage, so target creature gets +5/+5 and gains indestructible until end of turn. All creatures your opponents control able to block that creature this turn do so. You can also enchant this big guy with Lure, a 3 mana enchantment aura, and all creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. We also play Irresistible Prey, a nice card that replaces itself because it is a 1 mana sorcery and target creature must be blocked this turn if able and you draw a card. Roar of Challenge, a 3 mana sorcery and all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. It also has Ferocious, so that creature gains indestructible until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which is just great because Anzrag really needs that indestructible and can provide the power 4 or greater. We also play General Marhold El's Dragon, a 4 mana 4/4, and whenever a creature you control becomes blocked it gets +3/+3 until end of turn for each creature blocking it. This is great because we are also forcing mass blocks from our opponents, so Anzrag will easily outgrow those creatures. As soon as Anzrag is on the field, he'll be target number 1. So let's talk about a little bit of protection. Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard, a 2 mana 3/3 and we can sacrifice him so legendary creatures we control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. Heroic Intervention, a 2 mana instant, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. I personally think that Swiftfoot boots are better than Lightning Greaves in this deck, because equipped creature has hexproof and haste, so you can still target Anzrag with your abilities and spells. Of course it's a little bit more expensive to equip, but I think it's worth it. Mithril Code, a 3 mana artifact with flash and indestructible, and when it enters the battlefield attach it to target legendary creature you control. Equipped creature is indestructible. Gaia's Gift, a 2 mana instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains reach, trample, hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Tyvar's Stand, 1 green and X and instant, so target creature you control gets +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Due to all of the additional combat phases that we might get with Anzrag, we want to play creatures that also profit from additional combat phases, or that can cheat additional combat phases in so we can force our opponents to block Anzrag. For example, Bloodthirster, a 6 mana 6/6 flying trample, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, untap it. After this combat phase there is an additional combat phase. Bloodthirster can't attack a player it has already attacked this turn. Balor, a 5 mana 5/5 flying, and when it attacks or dies, choose one or more. Each mode must target a different player. First mode, target opponent draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. Target opponent sacrifices a non-token artifact, or Balor deals damage to target opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand. Goreclaw, Terror of Khal Zisma, a 4 mana 4/3 and creature spells you cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast. Whenever Goreclaw, Terror of Khal Zisma attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. Once you give Anzrag trample, your opponents will be forced to block him at some point, simply because of commander damage. Itali, Primal Storm, a 6 mana 6/6 and whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. I know, Ruby Daring Tracker isn't the most powerful creature in this list, but she's a very versatile creature in this deck, a 2 mana 1/2 with haste, and whenever she attacks, while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, she gets +2/+2 until end of turn. We can also tap her to add either red or green mana. If we can get additional combat phases with Anzrag, also Ruby can become quite big during one turn, and during the early game we can use her as a mana dog. Murroc, Fury of Akum, a 6 mana 6/6 and each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. It also has landfall, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. Let's go over a few primary card draw engines in this deck. Elemental Bond, a 3 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Colossal Majesty, a 3 mana enchantment, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Knave of the Dire Hunt, a 4 mana 3/3, and whenever one or more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. A triggered ability at the beginning of combat is also really scary in this deck. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 3 mana. If you do, double target creature's power until end of turn. That creature must be blocked this combat if able. Garruk's Uprising, a 3 mana enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Return of the Wild Speaker, a 5 mana instant, choose 1. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Or, non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. And then of course Rishkar's Expertise, a 6 mana sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. There are a bunch of other legendary creatures in this deck, and we want to use them immediately with Anzrag, so we need to give them haste. Which is why we play cards like Rising of the Day, a 3 mana enchantment, and creatures you control have haste. Legendary creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Gimli's Reckless Rage, a 4 mana enchantment, and creatures you control have haste. With Formidable, whenever you attack, if creatures you control have total power 8 or greater, target attacking creature you control fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Further, 3 mana enchantment, creatures you control have haste. Invigorating Hot Spring, a 3 mana enchantment, and it enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Modified creatures you control have haste, and as soon as the creature is equipped, has an aura on it, or has counters on it, it counts as modified. You can remove a +1/+1 counter from Invigorating Hot Spring to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. Fires of Yavimaya, a 3 mana enchantment, and creatures you control have haste. You can also sacrifice it so target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Rhythm of the Wild, 3 mana enchantment, creature spells you control can't be countered, and non-token creatures you control have Riot. You want to win more? You get it. Unnatural Growth, a 5 mana enchantment, and at the beginning of each combat double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. We will do basically the same thing with Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus, a 7 mana 4/6 with reach, and at the beginning of each combat double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. For 2 Phyrexian green mana and sacrificing 2 other creatures, put an indestructible counter on Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus. At some point during the game your opponents will be forced to block Anzrag, simply because you forced them to or because of commander damage, so you will most likely get additional combat phases. And especially then Unnatural Growth or Zopandrel get really out of hand. If you are then also able to enable Trample for Anzrag, you'll most likely take out a player with commander damage in 1 turn. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Anzrag, the Quake-Mole. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.